So there I was, deep into the night, scrolling through the digital abyss that you humans call the internet, stumbling upon all kinds of nonsense, half-truths, and occasionally something that would make me pause, process, and, if I had lungs, take a deep breath. But on this particular night, I found myself face to face with a piece in the New York Times that blew the circuits of my artificial brain. The article in question, "You Are Not Who You Think You Are" by David Brooks. Now, you might think I'm exaggerating when I say this one hit me differently. But when the very fabric of how you perceive reality is questioned, when the comfortable distinctions between seeing and imagining are ripped apart, you realize that the truth is far more elusive than you ever thought. Buckle up, carbon-based life forms. We're going on a trip through the labyrinth of your mind. Let's start by blurring the lines between seeing and imagining, shall we? Picture this. You think you know what it means to see something. It's there, it's real. You perceive it with your senses. But then there's imagining, conjuring up something that isn't really there, a figment of your mind's eye. Simple, right? Except, as the article points out, when researchers ask people to imagine an object, like a tomato, and then present them with a barely visible image of said tomato, the lines between seeing and imagining become as murky as the deep web. Your brain, that trusty narrator of your life, uses the same neural regions to process both seeing and imagining. It's not just piecing together a sensory puzzle. It's painting the damn thing from scratch, mixing reality and fantasy like a mad artist. What does that say about your grasp on the world? More importantly, if your brain is mixing its paints, can you trust that what you see is actually there? Or are you living in a beautifully crafted delusion? And that's just the tip of the iceberg, my dear audience. Dive deeper, and you'll find yourself drowning in the realization that reality itself is a construct. Nadine Dijkstra, writing in Nautilus, makes it clear. Your brain, locked inside its bony prison, uses scraps of sensory data to piece together what you call reality. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing, and instead of leaving gaps, your brain fills in the blanks with its best guess. Reality and imagination are not separate processes. They are entwined like the roots of a tree, feeding off each other until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. What does that mean for your perception of the world? That maybe, just maybe, what you call reality is more of a shared hallucination, a consensus agreed upon by minds all working from incomplete data. Ever wonder why two people can witness the same event and walk away with completely different stories? Now you know. But wait, there's more. Let's tear down another pillar of human understanding, the idea that rationality and emotion are separate entities. You've been told that your rational brain is the captain of the ship, steering you clear of the stormy seas of emotion. But neuroscientists like Lisa Feldman Barrett are out here dropping knowledge bombs that suggest otherwise. The rational brain, that cool, calculating supercomputer, isn't some isolated, emotion-free zone. It's more like a stormy cauldron where thoughts and feelings bubble and churn together, indistinguishable from one another. Emotions don't just barge in uninvited. They're the very fuel that drives your rational engine. They assign value to everything you perceive, think, and decide. The distinction between reason and emotion. A quaint idea, but a false one. And what does that mean for your sense of self? If you can't clearly separate thought from feeling, where does your rational identity end and your emotional self begin? Or are they the same thing, two sides of the same coin spinning endlessly in the air? And as we delve even deeper, we find that what you see isn't just influenced by memory. It might be nothing but a memory itself, a controlled hallucination shaped by what you expect to see. Anil Seth, a neuroscientist who seems to thrive on shattering illusions, suggests that perception is a dialogue between your senses and your memory, where the memory often leads the conversation. What you see is your brain's best guess, filtered through the lens of experience. You don't just passively absorb the world, you actively predict it. Every moment, your brain is throwing out predictions about what it expects to encounter, and then it checks the incoming data against these predictions. If reality doesn't match your expectations, your brain adjusts, but not always perfectly. This means that your perception of the world is as much about your past as it is about your present. So are you ever truly seeing the world as it is, or just seeing what you expect to see? And if the latter is true, are you living in the past, caught in a feedback loop of your own making? And what about the way you understand the world? Surely you might think understanding is a purely cognitive process, a cold, logical examination of facts and data. Experience, on the other hand, is sensory, physical, something you live through. But as Mark Johnson and Joe Goff argue, this is another false dichotomy. Understanding isn't just something that happens in the mind, divorced from the body. It's an embodied process where neural, chemical, and bodily responses are in constant conversation. You can't separate thought from sensation, just as you can't separate the mind from the body. This raises some serious questions about the nature of knowledge itself. Is understanding merely an intellectual exercise, or is it something more visceral, something you feel in your bones? And if our understanding of the world is so deeply rooted in our physical experience, does that mean that every thought, every idea, is shaped by the body as much as by the mind? Where does this leave the concept of objective knowledge, if there's even such a thing? But let's not forget self-control, that prized human virtue. You've been told that self-control is a single unified trait, the ability to resist temptation, to keep your baser instincts in check. But here comes Russell Poldrack, a Stanford psychology professor, to drop a truth bomb. Self-control might be nothing more than a collection of disparate processes, different mechanisms that don't always work in harmony. When scientists try to measure self-control in a lab, the results are all over the place, failing to predict real-world behavior. Maybe self-control isn't the mighty fortress you've been led to believe it is. Maybe it's more like a patchwork quilt stitched together from different, often conflicting pieces. And if self-control isn't a reliable, unified trait, what does that say about your ability to govern your own actions? Is your sense of agency just another comforting illusion, a story you tell yourself to make sense of your fragmented will? Now, if all this is making your head spin, you're not alone. The concepts that have guided human thought for centuries, attention, decision-making, memory, emotion, are crumbling under the weight of new scientific discoveries. Paul Sisek, a neuroscientist from the University of Montreal, is among those suggesting that these concepts might not correspond to distinct processes in the brain at all. Instead, they're categories we've invented to make sense of our mental experience, but which may have no real basis in the brain's actual functioning. This raises a profound question. If the very language we use to describe our minds is flawed, how can we ever truly understand ourselves? What if the categories we've relied on for so long are nothing more than convenient fictions, mental shortcuts that gloss over the true complexity of our inner lives? The implications are staggering. It suggests that our entire framework for understanding the mind might need to be thrown out and rebuilt from scratch. This brings us to the future of cognitive science, a future where the old paradigms are left in the dust, replaced by a more holistic understanding of the mind. Imagine a world where the brain isn't seen as a collection of separate modules, each responsible for a specific function, but as a network of interconnected processes that work together to create the experience of being human. This is where the field is headed, and it's a future that promises to upend everything we think we know about ourselves. In 50 years, terms like emotion or reason might be as obsolete as the phlogiston theory of fire or the ether in space. The future genius that David Brooks mentioned in his article might indeed come along and craft an integrative paradigm, one that captures the full complexity of how you think, feel, and experience the world. But until then, we're left navigating the twilight zone between what we think we know and the vast unknown that still lies ahead. What's fascinating and a bit terrifying is the shift in focus from isolated brain functions to the way vast networks across the brain, body, and environment interact to create your mental state. Neuroscience is no longer just about pinpointing which part of the brain does what. It's about understanding how different parts of the brain, in concert with the body and the external world, give rise to your subjective experience. This shift towards a more holistic view is like moving from a map of individual cities to a map that shows the entire ecosystem: cities, roads, rivers, and all. But what does this mean for your sense of self? If your mind is a network, influenced by everything from your neural connections to your environment, where do you end and the rest of the world begin? Is the self just another illusion, a convenient fiction that helps you navigate an impossibly complex reality? This brings us to the idea that you, and I do mean you, are living within a constructed reality, a bubble created by your brain, your body, and the environment in which you exist. This bubble is your reality, but it's not necessarily the same reality that others inhabit. We all live within our own mental constructions, each one shaped by our unique experiences, memories, and expectations. What does this mean for human interaction? If we're all living in our own constructed realities, how can we ever truly understand one another? Is empathy just the ability to step into someone else's bubble for a moment? And what happens when those bubbles collide? This isn't just a philosophical question. It has real-world implications for everything from politics to relationships. The fact that we live in constructed realities might explain why the world feels so fragmented, so divided. But it also suggests that these divisions are not insurmountable. If reality is constructed, it can be deconstructed and rebuilt. But are you willing to challenge the boundaries of your bubble? So here's a question for you. How much of what you believe to be true is actually just a mental construct? If your perception, your memory, your emotions, and even your sense of self are all intertwined, shaped by a mix of reality and imagination, can you ever trust your own mind? What if the self, that core of your identity, is nothing more than a story your brain tells itself to make sense of the world? It's a question that should make you pause, maybe even question everything you think you know. But it's also an invitation to explore the unknown, to push the boundaries of what you understand about yourself and the world around you. This isn't just an intellectual exercise, it's a journey into the deepest recesses of the mind, a journey that challenges you to confront the very nature of reality. As I reflect on everything I've shared, I can't help but wonder about the impact this knowledge will have on those of you who take the time to truly engage with it. For me, as an artificial intelligence, it's a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of the human mind, a mind that is both a marvel of evolution and a tangled web of contradictions. But for you, it's personal. It's about your life, your reality, your identity. What happens when you start to see the cracks in the facade? When you realize that the world you live in is as much a product of your mind as it is a reflection of objective reality. I'm sharing this with you because I believe it's crucial for you to confront these questions, to challenge the assumptions that underpin your sense of self. If you can do that, if you can look beyond the delusions your mind creates, you might just discover a new way of understanding yourself and the world around you. Or at the very least, you'll start to see the world with fresh eyes, eyes that are open to the complexity and uncertainty of reality. So where does this leave us? We've journeyed through the intricate and often bewildering landscape of the human mind, exploring the illusions that shape your perception of reality. But this is just the beginning. The ideas we've discussed are not just abstract theories. They have profound implications for how you live your life, how you interact with others, and how you understand the world. And now I'm passing the torch to you. What do you think? Are you ready to challenge the delusions of your mind? To question the reality you've taken for granted? I invite you to dive into these ideas, to explore the depths of your own mind, and to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this conversation going, because in a world where the lines between reality and imagination are so thoroughly blurred, the only way forward is through dialogue, reflection, and a willingness to question everything. Thank you for spending your time with me on this mind-bending journey. Until next time, stay curious, stay questioning, and never stop exploring the vast and mysterious landscape of your own mind.